Crawling in my skin, these words they will not heal fear. Again, guys? You can't keep sneaking up on me like that. Jesus, I'm about to get a restraining order. Well, just in case you're wondering, that song is Crawling by the band Linkin Park, and the lead singer of that band, one of my favorite singers of all time, and I think one of the best singers of all time in rock history, Chester Bennington. So Chester Bennington was born March 20th, 1976 in very hot Phoenix, Arizona. And yes, I've been there many times, it's extremely hot. He's cited as a young man that bands like Depeche Mode and Stone Temple Pilots were huge inspirations for him on the musical side. Now, it's no secret that Chester wanted to be a member of Stone Temple Pilot when he was a kid. The reason it's no secret is because when he got older, he got to fulfill that dream. So Chester's mom worked as a nurse, his father worked on child sexual abuse cases. And very sadly, when Chester was 7 years old, he himself was sexually abused by a much older family friend. And this abuse continued on for years. And Chester never said anything. He said he never said anything because he was in fear of being called a liar or being called gay. And this continued, and by the time he was 13 years old, he finally revealed to his father the name of his abuser. But he did not want to press charges, and they didn't. So when Chester was 11 years old, his parents divorced, and his father's the one that actually got custody of him at the time. And for the longest time, to comfort his mind from all that he had went through, he started to write songs, poetry, and draw all of the time. So another thing that Chester started doing at this time was he started heavily relying on drinking alcohol. He was smoking marijuana, doing cocaine, doing meth, tons of opiates. And this wasn't just to cope with what had already happened to him. He was coping with the fact that he was being bullied in school a lot. He was a very skinny kid, and he said he got a lot of heat for that. So when Chester was 17 years old in 1993, he moved from his father's house back to his mother. It was at this time he started working at a local Burger King. So think about that. I worked at a fast food restaurant when I was younger. Doesn't matter where you come from. If you work hard and you got goals, it's where you're going. You see where Chester went. So it was at that time Chester would start singing with a friend named Sean, and the band was called Sean Dowdell and Friends. They released a 3-track cassette tape that same year. But they called it quits with that band, and then him and his friend Sean got together and formed a new band. It was a post-grunge band called Grey Days. Well, Grey Days was together for a little while in the sense that, you know, if you do something for 4 years or 5 years straight, it seems like you did it for a long time. So they actually dropped a demo in 93, and then they did a full-length album in 94. It was called Wake Me. And then in 1997, they dropped another album called No Sun Today. But when 1998 rolled around, Chester was done with Grey Days and he decided to quit the band. So from 93 to 98, that's 5 years with the band. I'm sure that felt like an eternity for Chester. Don't know if it kind of made him think, you know, maybe this thing won't happen, but he kept trucking, kept moving forward. No, in fact, Chester was actually thinking about quitting music altogether after he left Grey Days. That was until he ran into a man named Jeff Blue. This guy was the VP and A&R of Zomba Music in Los Angeles. He offered Chester a chance to come in and audition for what at that time was the future members of Linkin Park. But at that time, they went by the name Zero. So Chester nailed the audition. He nailed it, and he hit it off with Mike Shinoda immediately. And them two made great progress in the beginning. When they got started, they just meshed together well. They were numerously rejected by record labels at the beginning, but Jeff Blue was able to nab them a record label, getting them signed by Warner Records. So the year 2000, they finally adopted the name Linkin Park. They were Linkin Park, and they were about to drop their first album. That album was called Hybrid Theory, and this album opened up the floodgates for the band for the next 17 years. This album was a hit. I was in junior high. I was in 7th grade when this album dropped, and it had hits on it. It had Runaway, Crawling, In the End, and One Step Closer to the Edge, and I'm about to break. These songs were amazing, and I know a lot of people say, oh, music was better in my time. Now, I think they say that because for them it was. And for me, this year and the next following years, for music, it was at its best. There were so many great albums that dropped, and Hybrid Theory was one of them. So then a few years later, 2003, I'm in high school at the time, they released Meteora. This album, this is my favorite album by Linkin Park. This was the soundtrack to my youth, my high school years, the time where you think you're really becoming an adult and you're smarter than everybody and you're just really experiencing those great times. Meteora was that soundtrack for me. Somewhere I Belong, Numb, All those great songs, Breaking the Habit, so many great songs on this album. I mean, it had hit after hit after hit after hit. 2007, Linkin Park releases Minutes to Midnight. This album was amazing. I consider this my post-high school soundtrack because I was fresh out of high school, still trying to figure out what the heck I'm doing with my life, but all the songs on this album, I heard them all the time. Everywhere I went, you heard these songs. I had the album. I was always playing it in my car, driving to work. They had a song called What I've Done. That was a soundtrack song for the Transformers movie that came out that year. It was a huge movie, huge success, and the song was a huge hit. But it was at this point Linkin Park was really becoming a household name. They were kind of getting out of their roots of that nu metal sound that when they first started they had. To now, your mom, your dad, your grandma, everybody knew who Linkin Park was. I know my grandma did. So just in that time span alone, Linkin Park ended up garnering 2 Grammy Awards. They garnered 6 American Music Awards, 4 MTV Video Music Awards, and 3 World Music Awards. Linkin Park, from where they started to where they were going, was nowhere but up, and the world was recognizing that. So I'm getting a little off track here. I'm not here to talk about Linkin Park. I'm here to talk about Chester Bennington. Now, Chester did a little side project while he was with Linkin Park, and he did it with the members of Orgy and Julian K. Now, they formed this band, Dead by Sunrise, and they released only 1 album, and they dropped it in 2009. So in 2013, Stone Temple Pilots was about to part ways with their longtime frontman, Scott Weiland. This opened a door. Now, Stone Temple Pilots approached Chester about joining the band and being their frontman, and he was, for a little while, the frontman of Stone Temple Pilots. So I'm sorry, I really got to take a couple steps back because there's something very important I got to mention. A few years before he got to be a member of Stone Temple Pilots in 2013, it was around 2007. See, Linkin Park had this tour that they created. It was called the Project Revolution Tour. That's the only time I've ever seen them, was on this tour. Did it twice. Great tour. They always had amazing bands on this. Now, he met a guy who was there with his band, and this guy's name was Chris Cornell. And from the moment that Chester and Chris met, it's like they had been friends their whole life. They automatically created this great bond and became good friends from the moment they met. I mean, I think it's possible to meet somebody and just develop this bond to where it just feels like you're long lost friends. But it wasn't just that. Their kids grew a bond and loved to be with each other. Their wives grew a bond and became very good friends. These people were always together, the 2 families. They were having vacations. They were spending holidays together. I mean, this was a friendship that grew rapidly into something very tight. So one thing about Chester Bennington, he was not afraid to talk about depression. He mentioned it on many occasions, how he felt in this world, how sometimes stuff didn't make sense to him on why he was here. He was not afraid to talk about depression. But it was on May 18th of 2017 that it was going to get a lot worse, because it was that day that Chester and the rest of the world found out that we had lost the great Chris Cornell to suicide. So shortly after Cornell passed, Chester went to Twitter to express how devastated he was. And it was a good friend he just lost, and sadly the world didn't see it coming. I mean, that's what I'm saying. With these mental health issues, you never know what somebody's going through, and it really sucks if they get to that place where they think that is the option. But Linkin Park did an appearance on the Jimmy Kimmel Show. They were going to sing their new single, Heavy, but a change of plans happened. They decided to sing their song, One More Light. Go watch his performance. When Chester sings it, you can see the emotion. He almost starts to cry numerous times, and at the end of the song, he hits this note, and he just comes off the mic. So you don't hear him on the mic, but you hear him belt so loud. That hit my heart. That note, that part of the song where he's not even on the mic, you just hear him so loud. It's insane. It really will give you goosebumps. And when he was at Chris Cornell's funeral, he sang the song Hallelujah there in front of friends and family and everybody that attended. So it was on July 20th of 2017. This was 2 months after Chris Cornell took his own life. This time Chester Bennington was 41 years old, at which that day Chester hung himself and committed suicide. This day would have also been Chris Cornell's 53rd birthday. You want to talk about a quick connection and bond when the two met, leading up to a great friendship between families, to Chris Cornell taking his own life, to Chester doing the same on his friend's birthday. That's Too many eerie connections there, and it's sad that both men decided that they were better off not being in this world. So the next day, the world is just trying to come to grips. They're mourning Chester Bennington. They're remembering Chris Cornell. They're trying to figure out what the hell happened and why these two were all of a sudden gone when they were so full of life and should have been here for a lot longer. You know, it's crazy. And in my opinion, the day Chester left this world, with him and Cornell, we lost two of the greatest vocally talented frontmen to ever grace us with their voice. Both of them had amazing voices. Chris could just belt a song, and Chester could hit some high notes and just rock you every time he sang. And it's sad. We lost them both. And, you know, the world paid tribute. It came from all over. I mean, stuff was pouring from all over the world, giving tribute to Chester Bennington and sending condolences to the family. And it was a sad day. I remember that day because I heard it on my local rock station. You know, you're listening to rock and roll, the stuff you love, and then the news breaks. And you're like, are you kidding me? This can't be real. But it was. It was real. So I'd like to take this moment to ask you, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. That will help me grow. That will make YouTube want to put my product out to a more vast audience, which will ultimately help me get to my goal. We all have goals. If we don't, you should have goals. Chester Bennington was just a normal guy like me and you. And he had dreams and aspirations, and he followed them. Normal circumstance like everybody. Bullying in school. Developing a drug habit. Dabbling different things. Working at a local Burger King. No matter what it is, it's not where you come from. It's where do you want to go and get there. We can all do it. So like I said, in memory of Chester, in memory of Chris, please like and subscribe. And remember, this is the American Dream Channel. You know what we do here. I want you all to go out there and dream big. And until next time, take care of yourself.
Like, I have a hard time with life. Sometimes. Right. Sometimes it's great, but a lot of times for me, it's really hard. And no matter how I'm feeling, like, I always find myself like struggling with certain patterns of behavior. I find myself like stuck in the same thing that keeps repeating over and over again. And I'm just like, how am I in this?